Healer's Touch by Deb E. Howell, Chapter 1. Llew didn't break stride as she kicked the empty glass bottle aside, barely giving it a thought. Litter was the least of hazards in Cheers streets at night. She walked with her head down, hands thrust deep in the pockets of her coarse, brown trousers, blending in with the evening's wildlife. With hair in a dire need of a trim, there was always a risk that the disguise wouldn't hold, but it only had to hold until she got home. She would cut the offending locks in the morning. A commotion broke up ahead at Camille's cat house. Some John lacking the financial means to state his desires by the looks and sounds of it. Perhaps he could have given thought about that before buying such a large bottle of whiskey. The townsmen hunted gold by day, oblivion and pussy by night, and sometimes the two nocturnal aims conflicted. Both could spell danger for Llew. She approached the still cussing men, stepping onto the road to give him a wide berth. At this time of night, at least one didn't need to be so cautious about steaming piles in the middle of the dusty streets. All the horses were asleep in their stables or padlocks, or waiting lazily outside of a bar or brothel. "Out for a good time, eh, boy?" The old coot stepped in front of Llew, stopping in her tracks. "I'll share one with yer." Llew tried to sidestep him, but he shattered her movement. "It's still 5 mirrors each. 2 men, 10 mirrors." The half-dressed madam on the porch folded her arms across her chest and stared down at them. "You said 5 mirrors per girl. We only need 1. His arms snaked across Llew's shoulders, drawing her into him. If she hadn't already been cursing staying out late with Kanye's, she sure would have started now. "What do you say? I'll let you go first. I won't even watch. Sure you won't mind me listening, though." Llew struggled to find her voice, her deeper, more boyish voice. She shook her head. 5 mirrors per service. The woman's eyes narrowed. "You want cheap, Rennie? You go down see Hetty's girls. They look after you real nice." But Hetty don't have your wee Tamra." Rennie pulled Llew closer to his mouth. His breath reeked like it was coming out the other end of his body. "Wee Tamra's my favorite," he confided in a low whisper. "Tamra's busy anyway. Now scoot." Camille waved the back of her hand in a brushing motion at Rennie, dismissing him. "And don't come back until you have some cash." Still clutching Llew, Rennie waved his bottle, miraculously not spilling any liquor. "Oh, you're a hard woman, Cammy." "Better a hard woman than a limp dick any day, Rennie." The woman flashed a gleaming white grin at them. "Maybe next time you'll rethink the whiskey, or at least buy it here. Then maybe we can talk discounts. Loyalty is rewarded at Camille's." "Oh, aye." He turned Llew with them to dawdle back the way she'd just come. "Women, eh? Never get nothing for free." Llew didn't know anyone who gave anything away for free, and didn't see why the brothel girls should be any different. "Well, lad, should we try Hetty's?" Rennie squeezed again. Llew tensed the second his step faltered. He regained his composure almost instantly and squeezed her shoulder some more, this time looking down at the way her shirt bunched across her chest. 2 small but distinct pinks appeared as her shoulders rounded under pressure. Well, looks like my luck's on the up and up." His arm reached around her shoulder as his hand could feel the soft flesh underneath Llew's shirt. He sucked back a glob of spit, took a swig from his bottle, and tried to bring her arm around in front of him. Llew pushed back and ducked under his arm, but he was quick and grabbed the loose waist of her shirt. "Hey, we were just getting to know each other." He tugged and Llew bounced against his chest. She used the momentum to break free of his grasp, turned and ran. The whiskey hadn't kicked in as much as she had thought because he was soon on her heels. She focused on keeping her line straight down the middle of the road. A struggling group of men leaving Polly's bar farther down the road made no moves to let her pass, seeming to find the spectacle of a young boy running from an older man interesting, verging on downright hilarious. Some of them reached out to slow Llew, but they didn't go so far as to stop her. Fearing that the men would turn on her, Llew didn't plead for their help, but pumped her limbs even harder, and a few moments later she was past them. Unhindered by the group, Rennie caught up to her, knocking her into a narrow alleyway between McNally's bar and Barbara Pearson's. The crash of the half-full bottle against the wall rang out as Llew fell to the ground. Quickly regaining to her feet, she found herself facing jagged glass and Rennie looking pissed off. "This bottle cost me the night with me, Tamra. Come here," he said, flinging both arms out in some drunken embrace. He missed, but the bottle swung dangerously close, and Llew hopped back deeper into the alley. "You owe me the price of a bottle of whiskey, girlie, and maybe a little bit more." "You broke it, you drunk bastard!" Llew dodged the man's next lunge and made a pass for the alleyway's entrance. He branched the bottle at her. "That ain't the language of no young lady." "Who said anything about being a lady?" They danced side to side, Llew looking for a gap, Rennie blocking. "Oh, you like playing at it like a boy, eh? Well, I ain't picky. Turn around. We won't even have to take those pants off." He paused to grab his crotch. "Fuck you." Llew lunged and Rennie blocked her path again, grabbing her and throwing her back on the ground. He scrambled at her feverishly, trying to get her trousers undone. Llew kicked wildly. She punched, she clawed, and when he hit her back, she grabbed his face, digging her fingers close to his eyes and returning the pain. Rennie slashed at her with the bottle, slicing her shoulder. Llew pressed her hand against his chin, pushing him up and closing her wound. He screamed and slashed again, cutting into her arm. Llew grabbed his wrist, healing the new scratch. Rennie cried out again and swung the bottle blindly, hysterically, cutting Llew's cheek, neck, chest, forehead, shoulder, ear, nose, eyes, throat. Somewhere in all the chaos, a strange peace overcame her. She relaxed and let it take her. Llew woke to the scent of blood, the jaunty tinkle of a piano playing nearby, light spilling across the wood plank wall, and a heavy feeling in her chest. No, on her chest. It was on her chest. It was sticky and damp. Smell of blood. Heavy thing. Sticky and damp. She pushed up. The corpse. She couldn't feel any breathing other than her own. Lifted, teetered, and then the strength in Llew's arm failed. She fell back and the body dropped down with her. A shudder ran through her body. A glass bottle smacked the ground and rolled, scraping the stones. Dim candlelight from the uncovered window above reflected from its shattered edge. A broken bottle. The dead man. Remember pain flitted through Llew's mind. He had attacked her, now he was dead. The events between those 2 points were a blank. Her shirt was wet, almost certainly with blood. Mustering all of her strength, she wedged her hands under the man's shoulders and heaved again, pushing higher on one side. His shoulders slid to the ground, easing the weight off her. Bracing herself on her elbows, she kicked and slid, freeing her legs. Clambering to her feet, Llew shook herself, trying to rid herself of the dead man's touch. Her near-white shirt looked black in the low light. Foul. Only slightly less with the notch that was her own blood. She could just make out his face, frozen in the expression of horror, and a flickering candlelight from the window above. There was no outward sign of injury Llew could see, apart from all the blood, of course. She couldn't be found with the body. The Ferris would hang her without question. She turned and ran from the alley, emerging alongside the front entrance of the Diamond Duster, the last of Cheers bars to close for the night, and even then usually only at the Ferry's specific request. "Bit of a rough night there, lad," someone called after her. Llew kept to the shadows. Not that there were many Cheers locals out this late at the dark folds of night, but she had no way to explain the blood-soaked state if she did run into anyone. The distance back to her hovel by the big river seemed greater than normal, but finally the dusty dirt road gave way to swaths of tussock, punctuated by the occasional matagorey and lancewood. She pushed her way through the long grasses and past branches heavy with yellow bell-shaped flowers, now gray in the early morning light, past her thatched, thigh-high hovel, before pulling off her shoes at the stony bank and wading straight across into the water, not bothering to remove her clothing. To have any chance at washing the blood from them, she would have to soak them now. The swift current carried away the sensation of the man's weight laying over her even as it lifted the blood from her skin and washed it away. It was her blood. It was all hers. He had killed her, and now he was dead. She had never killed before, probably because she had never died before. Healing, yes, she had done that. She knew what must have happened, and yet couldn't bring herself to admit it. Surely she couldn't do that. She couldn't come back from the dead. No one came back from the dead. She pulled the shirt over her head, then squeezed it under the water, rubbing it and rinsing it and rubbing again. The cold glow of dawn crept across the sky. The browned blood could not be washed from the garment. She had left Kenya's late, but not that late. How long had she lain unconscious, or dead? Llew cursed and threw her shirt to shore. She only had one other shirt, and she was almost certain it was getting too small. She would have to spend a good deal of her earnings on a new one, or take the risk of stealing more than her usual quota. But she maintained a quota for a reason. After all, she only needed what she needed, and being greedy got you caught. Already half undressed, she fought with her trousers until they jerked free of her body. They, too, were stained with her blood. Damn it! Clothing wasn't cheap. She could feed herself for free, but if she wanted to mingle with the general public, she had to buy clothes. While she knew how to use a needle and thread, her skills in that department only went as far as the basic repairs. She dug her hands into the riverbed, and then, with a handful of sediment, scrubbed the last of the blood off her chest, face, and arms. Now acclimated to the water's chill, she waded in a little farther and dunked herself under, emerging a few seconds later to wipe her eyes clear of the water and slightly too long hair trailing down her face. She pressed her feet through the muddy sediment, feeling it erupt between her toes, and it took the time to appreciate the warmth beneath the surface. Strange how that little bit of heat always remained, somehow not leached by the rushing water above. Like her own sense of worth, somehow not drained by living beneath the flow of Cheer's society. Cheer, named after the happiness of the first settlers experienced when they started digging gold. The gold was gone, as was the cheer, but cheer remained. She peered at her hands in the rippling water. A man had died at her hands, but she had died at his hands first. It was little consolation, but it made forgiving herself easier. Her fingers began to tingle and sting from the cold, and she made her way back to shore, wiped herself down with fistfuls of grass, returned to her little hovel, and wrapped her woolen blanket around her. Despite having to spend however many hours unconscious, she needed sleep. There were only a couple of hours before the market started. She drifted off, reveling in the aromas of the dew-soaked grass, damp stones, and thyme. The heat of the sun on her otherwise frozen toes woke her. Llew lay there in a few more moments, pulling the blanket clear of her legs, savoring the heat and drinking in the perfumed air. There was little in her life she cherished, but moments like these almost made everything worth it. She dragged herself from her bed, pulled on a clean shirt, which was a little too tight across the shoulders and hinted at the breast she preferred to keep hidden. She sharpened her knife on the river stone, grabbing tufts of hair in her other hand, and began hacking. The fringe had grown to her eyebrows, and the other sides were nearly covering her ears. Too long. She cared little for the end result. The less pretty, the better. By the time she finished, the sun was well up. The market would be in full swing. She struggled in the damp pants, fastened her belt, and headed for town, hoping brown stains on brown material would pass unnoticed. The monthly market was one of the few times the people of Cheer really mingled and paraded. Women displayed their curves with crunched-in waists below elegant necklines, and the men wore pressed shirts, trousers hooked up by suspenders, and vests decorated with gold chains and pocket watches. They preened and swaggered, yet still shared the street with others who had arrived in Cheer too late to make their fortune. The predominant color was brown in all of its shades, with splashes of red, blue, or yellow marking either women of class or girls prospecting for tricks. Llew was invisible among the finery and silent among the propositions. She had already collected 3 purses when something caught her eye. 2 things, but there was only one thing she would be taking home with her. That was a knife. It hung from the belt, slung across a pair of trousers filled in the most tantalizing way by a fine arse. She watched the way the folds of the material moved and shifted as the owner pressed by stalls selling every variety of produce, from meats to baked goods, handmade crafts, and even entertainment in the form of song or dance. If she walked about with a knife like that slung from her hip, people would reconsider pushing her into alleyways. She was halfway certain the knife's finery, carved ivory or bone handle had drawn her eye down first. A knife like that made a statement. She needed that knife. Her eyes trailed the handle everywhere it went. Her feet followed, and the rest of her body weaved its way between people and stalls. The arse the knife stopped. So did another street kid thinking he was in with a shot, and anger flashed through Llew. That was her knife. Whipping around as fast as she barely saw him move, the man bared his teeth and growled at the young would-be thief, frightening the desire for the weapon right out of him. Side on, Llew could see the man's vest. A leather vest, heavy with smaller knives. Not small knives, just smaller than the one at his hip. She nearly reconsidered a need for the knife, but was convinced she needed it more than that man did. He did, after all, have all those other at his disposal. The boy stammered out an apology. Released, he ran with absolutely no care for who he bumped into along the way. So unprofessional. The long-haired man in a dusty black, wide-brimmed hat turned and muttered something to his curly-haired companion. Both men laughed and turned their attention to his stall selling a range of meaty nibbles. Llew moved closer. It was hard to say inconspicuous. People divided around her. She was like a rock poking through water's surface. While extra height had its advantages, it was also beginning to get ridiculous. Llew was keeping pace with most of the boys she knew, and despite most girls her age having matured a couple years earlier, she only seemed to be getting taller and a little broader. No worthwhile breasts, though damn it, just enough to compromise her pose as a boy. As though to rub it in, a stylish dress with tasteful neckline cupping 2 beautiful rounded breasts hooked Llew's attention on its way past. It disappeared back into the crowd, and she looked down at her own shirt that hung almost straight down enough for nearly everyone to assume she was a boy, which was fine by Llew, really it was. A girl her age, with no parents, was better off being seen as a boy in a place like Cheer. Still, it didn't stop a small part of her coveting the chance to wear a pretty dress one day. One day, not today though. Dresses tended to lack pockets. The task at hand was the knife, and the opportunity to take it presented itself while the men were distracted by a clown hopping around on bells attached to his shoes. He jiggled these in the air while he juggled the flaming batons. The taller, curly-haired man's eyes shone in delight at the display. The shorter, darker knife carrier watched the fellow professional might. Nothing escaped his attention. She moved in, her hand twitching, her finely honed muscles tense. Keeping her eyes on the men and concentrating on looking like a casual passerby to other passersby, she flicked the domed catch securing the knife in place, then moved with the dark-skinned man as he shifted his weight. She gripped the end of the knife handle between fingers and thumb and pulled, gently but swiftly. Llew withdrew back into the throng. She hefted the knife a couple of times and smiled at the weight and balance. There was something so right about it. She slid the knife into her belt and pulled her shirt low as it could go. The tip hung below the linen, but it wasn't enough to give the game away, she was sure. Hey! Now she was less sure. A quick glance over her shoulder removed all doubt. He was enraged, and he and his companion were pushing through the crowd toward her. Llew took off, ducking fancy hats and parasols. She spared a moment of thanks for the unusually long legs that carried her through the crowd just as fast as the men following her. Skirting parasols and large bellies, and leaving a trail of indignant exclamations, she soon reached the edge of the market and slipped around the corner of a blacksmith's forge. Clinging to the wood-paneled wall, she listened intently. No footsteps to be heard. She took the chance to breathe deeply and relax. Being there, smelling the furnace and hearing the clang, she always felt contempt for the men who told her she couldn't run her father's smithery when he disappeared. Who were they to judge her ability? Being a girl had nothing to do with it. She had worked by his side for years and was perfectly capable. Hearing a creak, Llew looked up, but could see naught save for the eave of the roof. She stepped out from the building for a better look. A crouching figure pounced. The sun, suddenly revealed, blinded her and she was thrown back, her head ringing from the collision with the road. Her wrists were pressed to the ground either side of her head. Her vision cleared to reveal the face framed by sandy brown hair. She recognized the knife owner's companion. He was grim, although there was something else there, and of exhilaration lit up in blue eyes. She struggled in his grasp, but he was strong and straddled her across the middle. Another set of footsteps approached, and then a hand gripped her collar. The curly-haired man stood as she was wrenched from the ground and shoved into a nearby wall, something sharp pressed against her chest. She glanced down at the compact crossbow, loaded and digging to her sternum. She looked up into the dark, scowling face. Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard and would like to hear more, please hit the like and subscribe button. If you so happen to find yourself with your own published book and would like to submit your first chapter for a free audio cover, just email me at ebonyclock@yahoo.com with your first chapter, book cover, genre, and a brief synopsis of your book. See you next time on Ebony Clock Promotions.